Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, you can. Commissioner Abelman.
Here.
Commissioner Collar.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Present.
And Commissioner Carlson.
Here.
For the record, Commissioners Callahan, Falk, and Krazan are out, but we do have a quorum and we can conduct business.
Okay, let's go on to the salute to the flag. Can I ask our new commissioner, Lee Collar, to lead us, please?
All rise, please. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the order of agenda?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Do we have any blue folder items tonight?
Yes, we do. We had 3 items. We had the staff PowerPoint presentation related to item L2. Commissioner Falk, who's not here with us today, she submitted some comments related to item L2, and then we did receive some public correspondence on the same topic, L2. All of these have been emailed to you guys ahead of time, and they're now a part of the record.
Thanks. Okay, can I get a motion to receive and file?
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. None opposed? Let's see. Don't think we have anything on the consent calendar. Let's see. You see, you can mess up and just keep discussing and it goes on fine. It's been a while since I've done this. I'm sorry. So on the consent calendar, could I get a motion to approve the affidavit of a posting and approval of minutes unless there's any objection to what's in the minutes from last month?
I'm gonna let you say all that.
Motion to approve. I didn't have any issues with minutes at all.
Okay.
So motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. We are down to excluded consent calendar items. I don't think we have anything.
Nope.
We are down to public participation on non-agenda items. This section is for the public to speak on any subject that is not on this agenda. This total section is limited to 30 minutes, and each speaker can speak for 3 minutes. Each speaker is permitted to speak only once. We'll start with people in the room. Do we have anyone here to speak on non-agenda items? Yes, please, come on down.
Mike Martin, District 1. You should have something in the blue folder on this.
I forgot to mention, we did have a blue folder item. It was in the packet, it was included under the blue folder items that were sent to you, but it was public correspondence on non-agenda items as well. But that was included.
Okay, well, I've been up here several times, and what I sent you was from a little over a year ago, where the conclusion from this body was that the subject should be put on the agenda for discussion by this commission. Well, that never happened. And the subject at hand specifically is the Portofino slips. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. So this is kind of a ditto. But really, when the tactic seems to be foot dragging, and it's been years now, the only thing the public can do is not give up. So this is me not giving up. Those 2 slips at the Portofino are subjects of a coastal commission agreement. They have nothing to do with Community Services Sailing School, which has not used them since 2017, actually, and had no plans to use them. They're just sitting there, 2 slips, unused, with a couple of dinghies sitting there rotting away. Nobody around there can figure out what's going on. I tell them it's the city, and they just nod their head and go, okay, we got it. And I guess my only point is this is just a total waste of resources. Coastal Commission is all about coastal dependent visitor surveying, and really community sailing is something that we should all be encouraging. It's not happening, and it's not a community services issue. It's a lease provision in the Portofino lease. It's an obligation on behalf of Portofino to abide by the lease. It's up to Waterfront and Economic Development to enforce the lease. Community Services is only involved to the extent this is a conflict of interest. They glommed onto those slips that were intended for use by a nonprofit sailing club, and they've continued to hold on to them even though they're not using them, right? So apparently, even more important than community sailing is control. They don't need it for anything. They're not using it for anything. There they are. Fine, they eventually, I guess, have gone to the Coastal Commission, okay? But I got to question why coastal commission discussions should be the purview of rec and parks. That would scare me. They don't understand anything about any of this stuff. This body at least should be totally plugged into that because coastal commission is very damn important on a lot of fronts. You don't want to mess up the little stuff and then put the big stuff at risk. So I think we got a real process failure here. But like I say, I'm almost resigned. Mostly I'm just poking the bear here because the bear is gonna go back into hibernation if the public doesn't keep poking. So that's that. And I'm out of time, but I certainly could answer any questions or respond to any comments that you want to ask me a question about.
Have you seen that we status this every month?
I've seen that the answer always seems to be we're working on it. And last month, I eventually found it sort of buried in the minutes in the agenda package for this meeting, but the answer always seems to be we're working on it. So when I pulse waterfront education, Julie Call, as of an hour ago, the response is nobody ever approaches her on this. And when she reaches out herself to try and find out what's going on, she gets either no response or a brush off. And that's the way the coordination is being handled. It's being not handled. And I know you keep asking for status, but the status is always we're working on it. It's been like that for a year now, since the last time, since I initially stood up with the package that I put in the blue folder. So I'm not blaming you.
It sounds like that. And we don't typically engage during community comment, but we've status this every month. And Greg, we usually status this during discussion,
Sure.
but what's the latest status?
The latest is it's a work in progress, but we did get coastal commission approval last month. So now we're heading towards actually getting a contract in place between Julie Cole and the city. That contract is, the city attorneys are working on it. There's a representative of community services that's drafting it. I don't have any other updates besides that, but it's making its way.
Thanks. So see you next month.
Apologize if it sounded like blame, although my comment on process and still stands.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for engaging with this and getting us more sailing in the harbor.
Yeah.
And
I
I apologize.
No, it is an important issue. I mean, it is taking a very long time, so it is, and it's an important issue. So it's good that you are still poking the bear, shall we say. It's a good thing.
Okay, any other public comment on non-agenda items? Do we have any written comments or,
No
Anyone on Zoom?
e-comments and no participants in Zoom.
okay. Let's go on to ex parte communication. We don't have any public hearings, so I don't believe we have any ex parte communications, so that skips over item I and item J. I don't believe we have any items continued from previous agenda, item K. Okay, we are now down to item L, items for discussion prior to action. And the first one is Harbor Commission nominations and election of chairperson and vice chair, which I'm excited about because it gets me off the spot.
Yeah, each year we transition to a new chair, vice chair. Chair really is the one that leads the meeting, what Roger's doing, Commissioner Carlson's doing right now. In the absence of the chair, the vice chair usually steps in and runs the meeting. It's open for discussion. Typically, the vice chair becomes the chair, but it doesn't have to be that way all the time. But I'll open it up, turn it over to you guys to discuss, nominate, vote, however you want to go about doing this.
Thanks. Who's nominally next in the rotation?
Commissioner Abelman was the vice chair this past year. If we followed, you weren't? Oh, no, you're right. It was, I'm sorry, yeah. So chair was Leslie. She's going to transition out. Still Harbor Commission, but just not a chair or a vice chair. Commissioner Callahan was vice chair. She will, if we followed suit, she would go up to chair, and then it would be up to you guys to choose a vice chair.
Well, since she's not here, I definitely say we nominate her. So any discussion or motions on this topic?
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Commissioner Callahan as chair and Commissioner Abelman as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion?
In defense of Commissioner Callahan, she did speak with me and she was aware that the potential was there to be nominated and she supported it. So
Okay,
for
thanks.
everybody watching, we're not just nominating someone who's not here.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah, that's
We might, though.
that's fair. I know that she served her time
Yeah.
enough and is familiar with the process. Okay, do we need to have public discussion on this?
You can open it up to the public, yeah.
Okay. Any public discussion on, or public comment on who we're nominating for chair or vice chair?
Oh.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jim Light, District 1, not speaking as mayor. One thing you may want to take into consideration is Chairman Callahan is here due to being in a partial term, and then, she's almost through 2 terms now. She will be termed out next year in October. So this will be, I think, her second time to be in that position. You've got several new commissioners. It might be good, and Commissioner Abelman's been there quite a while. Might be good to kind of skip the normal, just to give new blood the chance to run the meeting. So I have nothing, I have nothing but respect for Commissioner Callahan, but it's a consideration to think about so that everybody gets their shot up there. Thanks.
In response to that, Commissioner Callahan had anticipated this whole scenario. And maybe a month or 2 ago, she approached me as I would be next in line, so to speak, and asked, she mentioned that she doesn't want to stand on ceremony and she'd be happy to support me being chair. I thought that I would prefer, for the sake of the experience of all those involved in the meetings throughout the year, that I would like to have some more time seeing them and getting the verbatim down and sort of the lay of the land. I have been doing this this is my 11th or 12th, and I'm not sure 12 meetings a chair makes. That said, I was happy to let her follow the ceremony and stay in up the protocol and be chair. I'm happy to be mama birded into being chair. Just want to sort of push me out of the nest if that's what everybody wants. But I'm in no hurry to be there. If she's going to be here for another year, why not have her go out on a bang before she's termed out? So, that's just sort of my 2, 4, 6, 8 cents.
Let's see, I appreciate the mayor's comments.
Jim's comments, he wasn't here.
Jim's comment, I'm sorry. Resident Light's comments. I find that we don't typically get to set our agenda. Our agenda flows from the council, and we all manage to, bring topics and discuss things with Greg. So it's a little different here where the chair tends to run the meetings more than, set the policy and direction for the whole city. We tend to be pretty collaborative. We tend to hear each other. We tend to come to consensus and have unanimous votes without being rollovers. So, I appreciate the comments, but I lean towards sticking with precedent and giving everyone a chance. We all tend to serve 8 years. We all tend to get a couple chances in the seat. So, I tend to think let's let it roll. I have no concerns about bringing, making sure any of us are heard with Vicky or you as chair.
And I agree as well. I think that makes sense.
I would agree too.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, let's call the vote on the meeting. Can we have a roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Abelman.
Aye.
Commissioner Collar.
Aye.
Commissioner Bauer.
Aye.
And Commissioner Carlson.
Aye.
4-0, we have a new chair, Commissioner Callahan, and a new vice chair, Commissioner Abelman. Commissioner Callahan's not here, so I'll request the vice chair to step in immediately and help run the
It's
second
really
half
no
of the
different
meeting.
than if I just would have become chair
Yes.
anyway.
So my brief coup is over.
All right, so thank you, everybody. Moving on to item L2, discussion and possible action regarding a draft commercial plan for King Harbor.
Thank you, thank you. So yeah, we're here to discuss the potential implementation of a new commercial vision for the waterfront called the King Harbor Commercial Plan. Before I get into the PowerPoint, I do want to invite up Citizen Light. Mayor, oh, this time Mayor Light. He's going to do a quick introduction for you guys, and then I'll take over from there.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, commissioners. So I just want to give a little background. Before I was even a harbor commissioner, Bill Brand and I were sitting around one night talking about, now that Center Cal's over, where do we go from here? Because, you know, it's easy to say no to something, but how do you come up with something to move forward? And we both came to the conclusion that we wanted to do it the opposite of what happened in the process with the Center Cal Mall, which was, you know, define all the commercial first and then figure out where the recreational would fit in. So the result of that was, you know, as Bill became mayor and got a council that was a majority that thought a lot the same way, he kicked off what became the amenities plan and sent it straight to this commission to actually create that. The plan was always then to go back with the second half, which is now that you've defined the big pieces of property that will be taken up by the recreational, what can we do commercial-wise to keep the harbor, you know, flowing smoothly and funded well with a reasonable amount of development. Secondary to that was subsequent to that, and this is after, well, this is while Bill was still mayor. We got into the, you know, we actually found out that it's written that the commission weigh in on leases. And you remember when I found that and we brought it up in here. And so, you know, it would be very hard for, as we discussed, for the commission to get involved in each individual lease because you'd have to come into closed session and it would complicate and slow down, you know, moving forward. So what we had decided was strategically, you know, on a quarterly basis, look at the mix of leases coming up and give some direction. I saw this as the prime opportunity for you to weigh in on, you know, future planning of what happens with the different leaseholds in the harbor. So rather than bog this down, if you remember, it was, I forget how many million to generate the amenities plan and took well over a year and a half to get that out, plus time to go to the council and all that. I took it on myself to take the stuff we'd been talking about for my 7 years, almost 8 years on the Harbor Commission, things I had been talking with Director Kapovich, things I've been talking with Mike Witzansky, things I've been talking about with Bill Brand, and kind of fold them all in to a definition of a commercial plan for the harbor. And that's what you see before you now. It's not the prettiest or glitziest thing that's ever been produced by the city, but I think it gets to outlining, you know, a policy, a broad level policy for leases in the future, and takes care, it addresses some shortcomings that we've seen through the years. So I appreciate your review of it and look forward to your feedback on it. And with that, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thank you.
I do want to remember, this is like the amenities plan, this is like putting big pieces of the puzzle out there, not designing, you know, how signs are going to look or what color things are, but broad policy-based wording that can be applied as a guidebook for the future as we get down into the individual leases. So I appreciate you guys looking at this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I want to reiterate that this is really a guiding document that staff will utilize to not only seek out potential businesses down there for vacancies, but to help us with lease negotiations for some of these larger master leaseholds. Do we want to break them up into smaller chunks or not? You know, and we do tackle parking a little bit because we foresee a challenge there, but it really doesn't, you know, set any strict criteria other than marching orders for how we want to approach the commercial development down in the waterfront. So as Jim mentioned, we've got a public amenities plan. We're working towards executing a lot of those major improvements. This is taking, after we've got our overall goals for the public amenities portion, setting aside what we want to see on the commercial side. Now, the benefit of the amenities portion of the waterfront is that there's a lot of grant opportunities out there for the city to take advantage of to help build. Seaside Lagoon is coming from the state. Department of Boating and Waterways is helping us out with the boat launch. They'll likely do something with the small boat launch. There's incremental areas with different agencies that'll help us pay for it. But when it comes to this commercial side, there's no grant opportunities out there. Yes, we're the property owner, it's our infrastructure, but it's truly gonna be on the city to pull this off. And what we plan to do is actually trade off term for improvements. So whoever we get to take over a certain building or a certain leasehold, the expectation is we'll give you 20, 30, 40 years, whatever we negotiate, and in turn, you'll rebuild a structure for us and make it like new. Let's see here. So we kind of went into this. This is really just the goals. There's 3 primary items that we're going to be addressing tonight. One is the size of our master leases, our existing master leases, breaking those up into smaller sections, kind of regrouping them, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Another defines kind of preferred uses, a list of uses that we would like to see out there: family entertainment, restaurants, boating facilities, marinas, that kind of thing. And then the third thing is we do foresee a bit of a parking issue down there. So, I'll use Moldy as an example. We're currently planning to do a new boat launch down there. The boat launch itself is going to gobble up some of the surface parking lot that is on Moldy because we need turnaround areas and washdown stations and the ramp itself. But then the boat launch itself has a parking requirement depending on the number of lanes that we design. It's 30 stalls per lane. The amenities plan also calls for additional square footage for a market hall, for a second story above International Boardwalk. And there's a pad 2 site out on the pier that's currently undeveloped. That's all additional square footage that isn't realized yet, and parking requirements are based on square footage. So somehow, somewhere, if those 3 projects that I named are gonna materialize, we actually have to provide on-site parking for that. So between, forecasting what's needed for the amenities themselves, plus the future projects that we foresee that are undeveloped and we plan to develop, we do think that there's going to be a parking shortage. So this plan actually does look into certain areas that we think could accommodate an additional parking structure. We'll get into that. So obviously there's a sandbox that we have to play in here. The amenities offered in our waterfront, again, take precedence. We've got to follow our own coastal plan. We've got to follow the Coastal Commission, municipal codes. But we also have to really consider anything and everything we do to be in the waterfront proper. We can't rely on future properties that we may want to acquire in this document. That's not to say we won't acquire property. It's just we can't foresee and plan on, buying a property across the street to accommodate our parking issues. The point is we don't have that property. We can't plan for it. What if it doesn't happen? Right? Then this whole document goes to pieces. So we just have to plan with the area that we have. So it's going to be east of Harbor, from King Harbor Yacht Club all the way down to the pier. So I'll get into the consolidation and the reconfiguration of the master leaseholds first. The first one is the slips, the marinas themselves. Right now we have the King Harbor Marina, which is our largest marina. It's on the north end of the harbor. We have Port Royal Marina. We have the Portofino Hotel that has their own set of slips. And then the city runs a small set of slips, about 70 of them in Basin 3. I'll tell you, being a property manager and being in government, we're not the quickest to solve issues. It's not our priority, nor our expertise to run day in and day out operations. So what this draft does, it says it wants us to consolidate the marinas a bit more than we are right now. So it calls for the King Harbor Marina to consolidate with the Port Royal Marina to hopefully consolidate with the Basin 3 Marina. It doesn't really say exactly how that has to happen. It's just consolidate and get the city out of the marina operations business. Portofino would remain with their few slips that they have. The plan does cut off some slips for the King Harbor Yacht Club. But really the bulk of Port Royal, King Harbor, and potentially Basin 3, we'd like to have one entity operating all of those. Another item is the King Harbor Master Leasehold. We call it the Majestic Leasehold. It's the largest master lease we have. It consists of the King Harbor Yacht Club, Crystal Cove apartment buildings, 2 hotels, the slips that I just mentioned, right? Over 800 slips, a gym, and restaurants and retail. Now, when you're talking about a master leasehold, finding somebody that has the expertise in all of those various use classifications, it's a diamond in the rough, in my opinion. Most of the time, you'll get somebody who might be with a residential background and is fully capable of handling the apartment complex, but they may have no idea how to run a marina or a restaurant per se. So this plan proposes that as staff moves forward with negotiations, that we actually break this leasehold up and we let the residential become its own master leasehold. So we find somebody directly to manage the Crystal Cove apartments. We do the same with the King Harbor Yacht Club. They're a very unique enterprise, nonprofit, and we give them their own master leasehold with a number of slips so that they can rent out slips. We keep the Portofino Hotel separate. We do the 2 hotels, each of them would be separate master leaseholds. And then we maybe combine the gyms and the restaurants under one. So it's dividing this up, kind of a divide and conquer. And the idea is hopefully you have somebody who's just managing that one use and is an expert in that one use, if that makes sense. This draft also identifies kind of our frequent vacancies. I don't want to call them trouble spots, but there's a few areas that are routinely vacant. One of them is the RDR, the RDR vacancy. There's a subterranean, sub-level basement that's constantly empty. We have the Old Gold's Gym site that's actually to the east of Harbor Drive. The city owns that site. We used Tideland's money to purchase that site. And even though it's not in Tideland's area, it has Tideland use restrictions because we use Tideland's money to purchase it. And Tideland use restrictions are really marina related, right? Boat sales, marinas, slips. You could do a restaurant. But given that use limitation because of how we purchased the site, we're finding trouble filling that space. So this plan actually identifies that site and says, hey, let's just try to unencumber that. Maybe it's we purchase it using non-Tideland's money, so it opens it up to other uses. Maybe it's instead of purchasing it, we do a land swap somehow. We might find a solution that's not even listed in the plan, but the idea is to direct staff to unencumber it, to try to fill it. Same with that RDR property, that sublease. Work with the actual master leaseholder, find out why he's having trouble locating somebody to go there and try to work with it. I mentioned parking before. So there's 2 tactics here. We've got what I assumed, what we perceive to be a parking shortfall when you consider what the amenities plan calls for. We were losing the Joe's Crab Shack site, but losing it for a good reason. We're gaining a waterfront education facility. But I imagine that waterfront education facility isn't going to contribute to the Tideland's funds like a business would have. So in terms of revenue coming in, even though we have a great use that's going to be located in there, that revenue is going to be diminished. Same with the boat launch. It's going to replace the cantina that's out there right now. That's square footage lost. That's less revenue that we're seeing. So we do place an emphasis on the empty Pad 2 site. We do place an emphasis on the idea of a market hall over by the R10 area. And we do place an emphasis on potentially getting a second story on International Boardwalk. That makes up for the loss of square footage in terms of revenue generating uses that we've lost because of amenities that we've essentially prioritized. But that additional square footage does come with parking requirements. We're going to learn a lot with the boat launch study that is about to actually commence here pretty soon. We're going to do a comprehensive parking analysis for parking supply versus parking demand versus parking requirements. So we're going to learn a lot, but this plan does kind of just illustrate that between the parking that we're going to lose because of the amenities and the square footage we hope to gain, parking could potentially be an issue. So Measure C says that we can't build a parking structure south of Portofino Way. So everything south of Portofino Way is pretty much off the table. But when you look at our completely developed waterfront, and it's completely developed with either an amenity, a building, or a surface parking lot, it's really only the surface parking lot that leaves itself or lends itself with the ability to add parking, and that's with a second story. You put a parking structure above it and you double the amount of spaces that are on there. Again, we're going to learn a lot with that parking study that we're about to do in the next 6 months to see just how many spaces were in surplus or in deficit. We're not sure yet. But again, this is a policy document that says, hey, why don't we look at certain surface parking lots north of Portofino, the one we've identified is actually the area shared by the Port Royal Marina, as an opportunity potentially to build a parking structure. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a large document. I know I didn't cover everything. I kind of went high level for you guys. We did get a lot of comments, both from Commissioner Kazan and Commissioner Falk, as well as some public correspondence on a bit of the narrative section at the beginning of the document. It doesn't set forth the policy of the goals. It kind of has, the intent and all that stuff. We can certainly comment on that stuff, but I do want to keep to the point of the document. I'll let discussion start, but I do have some comments from both Falk and Krazan. If that helps spur discussion, I can kind of get into that. Otherwise, I'll leave it to you guys to start.
Well, I mean, if they were here, we'd have them speak. So please, if you have comments on that.
Sure. So I'll start with Falk. One of the preferred uses is actually boat sales. She recommended adding boat dealers or boat brokers. We actually got some public correspondence from Mark Hansen that kind of alluded to the same thing. I'm open to it. To be honest, when it comes to these list of uses, we're using a lot of the uses that are already prescribed in the municipal code. And the planning department, they've got a list of like maybe 45 types of uses. Obviously, there's more than 45 types of businesses out there. So a part of their MO is they take a look at what your business model is and they place it into one of our 45 land use categories. And that dictates what's permitted and what's not permitted or what requires a conditional use permit. I will tell you, boat dealers and brokers would be lumped into boat sales. But if we want to be super clear, I don't mind adding the detail, just to be super, super clear. Commissioner Falk also noted that the amenities plan calls for dry boat storage. She asked for consideration that we also address that issue in this commercial plan. And I don't tend to disagree. When we were doing the amenities plan, I think we thought of it initially as like what the city would tackle, what the city would potentially provide on behalf of a private entity. But we did start a subcommittee for dry boat storage, and what we're learning is that the solution could be a private-public partnership too. We just don't know. So if it is a private partnership where we're trading lease term for, racks or, whatever it takes to get a dry boat storage facility going, that should be addressed in this document as well. Her third point was really in terms of the wayfinding signage. She thought about with the website as well. Right now, we have a city website. We have two business association websites, King Harbor Association and Pier Association. Sure, there's the physical getting around the waterfront that should be made easier, which is addressed in this document, and as well as the amenities plan for that example. But she thought that maybe our website could also be consolidated between those three groups to make it just a one-stop shop. There was a call out of certain sailing clubs and one was not mentioned. It was the Marina Sailing Club that's within the gym lease. She thought that we should for sure put that in there so it's not an overlook, and to create language that says we should try to retain that sailing group. I don't disagree with that either. One other idea that she had was, in addition to our idea to locate a parking structure in that Port Royal Marina area, surface parking lot, she was concerned about blocking views, creating more of a corridor feeling while you're going down Harbor Drive. Real considerations, but what I'll say is this is just one site and it's one story. I think the Portofino Hotel, which sits a good amount more west than what we're talking about, is a 3-story building. So I don't know if it would block views per se, but I absolutely understand that corridor feeling that we want to avoid. She also mentioned that the Gold's Gym site, which is east of Harbor, could potentially be a parking landing spot. But again, if we're trying to unencumber the Gold site into a revenue generating option to make up for some of the lost square footage because of the boat launch and because of the waterfront education facility, this could be better served for a revenue generating, maybe not parking. So I'll leave that with you. Commissioner Curzon also submitted comments. She got them in on time, so they were actually a part of the backup. I don't have to get into all of this if you don't want to. She did suggest a max percentage for liveaboards. You know, staff doesn't recommend putting a limitation on our master leaseholders for how they operate liveaboards. We've been speaking with a couple of our master leaseholders, and it was just agreed upon that they should be allowed to manage that. Typically, you know, the operator that we were speaking to keeps the slips at or below 10%, and then they like to spread them out so they're not all in one area. They kind of spread them out throughout the marina, and just giving them the authority to kind of do that on their own was recommended. Let's see, surface lot between Blue Water and Shade should be redeveloped if AES is acquired by the city. Again, this is one of those ones where it's a precipice of us acquiring a property that's outside the waterfront. Is it a bad idea? No, but it's just something we shouldn't address today now. She wants us to require easements across lease lines to accommodate pedestrian crossings, things like that. This is all private property. It may look like there's right-of-way out there. It may look like there's roadways. It's all private property. We own it all. We don't need necessarily easements to do a crosswalk, so there's no need for this comment. The RDR lease and the Maison Ritz leases, they're on the southern edge of our pier. There's certain outdoor areas that are underutilized, and she recommended encouraging play areas, outdoor dining, chairs for viewing the beach and the ocean. I thought that was a great comment. And then one of the maps that delineates what I'm calling our harbor south and pier delineates that we look for a skate shop and a snack shop within the Fun Factory lease. And that's true. This commission has actually talked about both of those specific uses. But because we don't know who or what's going to go in there yet, she thought maybe be a little bit more vague and put family fun use and skate park serving use to give us a little bit more wiggle room. And I don't necessarily disagree with that comment either. Those are their 2 comments. I'll leave it to you to ask me questions, discuss on your own. We can take public comment once you've done, but.
All right. Yes, Greg, I'm reading over Commissioner Curzon's comments. And I believe she said, when I'm reading it here, marina leases should include clauses requiring a certain percentage or a minimum number of liveaboard slips. You say max percentage of liveaboard here in your summary.
But my point stays true.
Okay, so you don't want, I just want to, so you don't want to do it, you don't want to say
Right.
min or max,
Right.
okay.
Right.
And my other comment is on the parking structure. I don't like the parking structure. I don't have another solution right now, I'll admit. That's where I'm coming from on that.
And I'll mention that again, this is a vision. This isn't saying we shall build a parking structure. It's more along the lines of we'll look into it if parking becomes an issue, which we think it might be.
All right, and a couple other questions here. There's no mention of the moorings, which I think is currently run by the city. Would that be part of the, one of the marina master leaseholds?
Yes, it would. Right now, our Basin 3 property manager manages those moorings as well. So that would be encapsulated with the Basin 3.
Okay, and also there is, while the Lanakila and Nahoa, Nahoa, paddle clubs, the outrigger clubs are mentioned in the intro, there's no mention of their lease.
It's not in there right now. So if you guys support wanting to keep them, transition away from them, we can discuss.
I mean, I think they add quite a bit to the harbor and they're quite active out there.
Yeah, you want to come on up?
So, apologize. The reason that's not in there is we call out MOB in the amenities plan, and if you look at the MOB master plan, it has the area for Lanakila laid out separately. So we can certainly put it in here, but I didn't put it in because I figured it was covered under the amenities plan and the MOB master plan. Certainly, you know, relish the both of the outrigger clubs and don't want to exclude them. And you can put it in here if you want. I'm just giving you my excuse for not putting it in.
All right, that's all I have.
Thank you so much. I've got a few items. One thing is, I think as we look at that, I mean, I have no issue with the city getting out of managing certain items. And often that's done just by hiring a company, not necessarily having another lease on top of a lease, right? I'm kind of curious on how many other, have we ever looked at how many other harbors structure themselves that way, where we have these dueling, you know, two leases, a master leasehold, and then subleasers underneath it? For me, there's benefits to that, but there's also a lot of costs and then lack of control. And I want to touch on one last thing before I leave that, and then you can, which is Commissioner Curzan's comment about easements. See, right now, even with the amenities plan, you can't really put a walkway through another leasee's. You'd have to change the lease in order to get, right? We lack that control. So easements might not be a bad idea, but
Okay, so
there's a lot there.
the amenities plan is our vision, and I'll use the promenade, the pedestrian promenade as our example, because you're absolutely right. There's areas of the promenade, which is a very long promenade that connects King Harbor Yacht Club all the way down to the south of the pier, where we don't have the width that we wish we had. That document already guides me that when we're renegotiating with these master leaseholders and we're exchanging term for improvements, that the improvements include backing some of the buildings off and rebuilding so that we do get that width. Again, as property owner, we have a lot of authority in that sense in ensuring that we're creating spaces to accommodate something like the pedestrian promenade. We don't need an easement to dictate that this is public property.
Okay,
It already is, right?
right, well, we already own it, that's correct.
Right, right. To your question about the leases, you know, we're a bit unique. Like, a lot of harbors don't have quite as much commercial on them, if at all. I think at Dana Point, they've got a little bit, but that's county run, not city run. I've seen that in the few examples that do kind of share this environment, that a master lease is the preferred method. You do lose a little bit of control, but that's where the negotiations and the contract become really, really important. Where we're kind of in the middle is we've got quite a bit of master leases where we give authority to the master leaseholder to negotiate with the sublessees, but we've got quite a bit of direct leaseholds too. International Boardwalk, Pier Plaza Office Complex, a lot of the pier. And we do have a property management group that does a really great job at property management, but that doesn't clear my department from addressing a lot of issues. And we spend a lot of time on those issues, whereas a master leaseholder would technically step in those circumstances, right? So even though we do have a hired property management firm, I step in and help a lot. Yeah.
Are you mayor light or resident light?
So, reason I bundled properties was the city is not good at reinvesting in its buildings. And what we find is, we can, if we bundle enough of the leases, subleases that we do today into a master lease, and you give them a long-term lease, you can get them to invest to rebuild it. And we're facing a lot of rebuilding. We got the Pier Plaza, those buildings are old. We got almost all the buildings on the pier, with the exception of RDR, are at the end of their useful life. And if we think the city is going to invest in doing that, we'll be here for
There's no money.
a quarter century, 50 years before that. We'll probably have to fall over before we do it. And so that's why, I recommended the bundling the way I did, to try to get enough of the businesses together to make it worthwhile for someone if they took a long-term lease there to invest in it, but not go the Center Cal route where we gave it, one giant thing to everybody, to one entity, and give them too much control. So that was the thought behind that, and hopefully incent the more investment in the area. We see it, like Alan Sanford's lease with Jeff Jones. They're putting a lot of money into that. And so I think they can do that more efficiently and effectively than we can through the government side. And if you look at it, we're not going to go lease by lease on the International Boardwalk and recondition a whole place and then put it up for lease again. It's just not going to happen. And for those small leases, we're never going to get the investment level to get those things rebuilt. So we may get some, pretty fronts and some indoor, facades and stuff like that, but we're not going to get them rebuilt that way. So that's the thought behind why I did what I did.
And the California Surf Club's a good example because they saw what was happening with the amenities plan. They saw the city putting their money where their mouth was. We have a lot of seed money that's going on with Seaside Lagoon and the amenities plan, about $1.6 million worth, plus the International Boardwalk pavers at a tune of $1 million, plus the improvements to the parking structure. We are investing in our public-facing amenities right now, even though there's grant monies that are coming in to do a bulk of that heavy lift. They saw that and said, I think interest and increased pedestrians are going to occur down here, increased traffic. And it's our first private investment that knocked on our door and said, we'll trade improvements for a lease term. And I think that's going to happen more and more, which is why this document's so important.
I guess I think it would be interesting to have an analysis to see how much that costs us, though. I mean, obviously, since people are willing to put a bunch of money into do their own, they're doing essentially their own tenant improvement, their own TI, right? They're actually going to rebuild a building, for example. Because they're willing to do that, there is obviously money in the back end that they can recover. So it'd just be interesting to understand the analysis versus the city taking this on. I think in some ways, well, you could answer the question, like, how are we doing with the slips that the city currently manages? Is that?
They're in need of complete repair.
Well, they are, yeah. No, there's that issue of
Yeah.
where are we going to come up with the money to fix
Well,
these
I'll tell
things,
you,
and it's a huge issue.
We applied for a grant just for Basin 3, which is just 70 slips. Now, we did include the cantilever deck that the amenities plan calls for, but we asked for $30 million to cover that project. We got 1.4. So, in terms of creating a partnership, it's almost paramount because the numbers that we're talking about are so big. I don't know if, at least on the commercial side of things, if redevelopment doesn't happen without a partnership. There's just not money. The city's a nonprofit kind of by definition, right?
Yeah.
And it's great that the amenities that are being funded by the grant opportunities are encouraging the private investment to come here.
Yeah, no, I see that. It always just seems like the city, like that this harbor should be an economic engine for the entire city, Redondo Beach. And so that it should be generating just, in theory.
It still can be. We just have to negotiate the leases for the most part. And I'll just use this as an average because this isn't 100% true all the time. But we get 10% of gross sales, right? So the better the businesses do, the better our income is too. And I get it. If we owned it outright, we'd get 100%. I totally understand that. But we're also not doing the upfront improvements either, And a lot of these things isn't going to be a TI. it's going to be a rebuild.
Yeah, I would also just be interested in like how much revenue the city gets on parking versus, you mentioned a parking structure doesn't generate as much income as, but if you had a sublease holder and then looked at how much money that eventually filters through to the city, how does that compare? I mean, we make pretty good money on our parking, right? Isn't that true?
We do okay. Yeah.
I don't know, it's just been interesting to have, an analysis of all of that done. It'd be difficult to do, I realize, but.
Well, I think, an analysis like that can still happen. This is a visionary document, right? It's look into doing a parking structure, look into negotiating, the promenade width along Port Royal. It's just directing staff, kind of giving us our marching orders for how we should approach these leaseholds when they start coming up.
Right. Well, it's essentially if you had a lease, the leaseholder, and then it's one hotel, and then we really wouldn't be doing two leases, right? We wouldn't have a master leaseholder, would we, in that situation? Or we would, you're saying, just because we need the capital to improve the
Right.
building? Okay. Yeah, it's. No, I'm done. Thank you for now.
Okay, thanks. I'm not really sure where to start. I sort of have three categories of comments. My first category is just to say, this is great. I wish we'd had it 5 years ago. Let's just get going. Let's just sign it as is, and let's just get going and not bother with any comments. Because I think the actual person who shows up to do a lease, there's going to be some variation in it. It's not going to be perfect. And whatever we write here, we're going to need a little bit of flexibility in anyway. On the other hand, at the other extreme, believe it or not, I've got a lot of little comments where, we should mention this, we should mention that. We should mention dive and surf. What better business partnership for the harbor than a company that's been there since 1953 and has a boat in the harbor and takes divers out and takes divers out in Vets Park and is, training people to love the water and is one of the reasons I'm here. So, I could add a lot of detail to this, and if this turns into, a letter from us or a more detailed edit, I'm happy to volunteer and help with that. Kind of in the middle between the two, I'll try to make, my major item comments. I mentioned that I see us needing some flexibility in who actually shows up when someone shows up to sign a new lease. I also worry that on the other hand, we need some protection when those leases change hands. And I don't know if that's something we're considering changing or would mention in this document. It's my understanding that right now, when a lease changes, all the city can kind of really do is a credit check.
It really depends on the existing lease. We're getting better at creating more checks and balances. Because you're right, there's examples where there's maybe one or two criteria that we can look at, and if they meet those criteria, we can't really protest. I will say we're going the opposite direction and creating more criteria in our new releases to give us some more subjective opinions to be able to put our foot down and say no, but.
Great, yeah, I knew you were doing that and wanted to give you another opportunity to mention it. And another thing that makes me feel okay with where we are is this is another reason to break up the master leaseholds. If you mess up one restaurant, that really hurts. We don't have that many restaurants. But if you mess up, half the pier or half the harbor, oh, it hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts. So it's another reason to break up these monstrous master leaseholds. I did notice in the strategic plan homework you got, there was a study of this.
There's a few things. Are you talking about the harbor? Was it Dave, the one that you were working on, the harbor department model? Is that the one you're referring to?
The harbor business management model. Maybe that was, I forget the exact title. I should have double checked it.
That one's not ringing a bell.
I thought there was one for, what mechanism should we have public-private or public-private partnerships for businesses in the harbor that was due in January.
There is more of an economic development initiative where it talks to just creating a subcommittee, a working group, if you will, to brainstorm how best to attract, retain, that kind of a thing?
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And does that work with this or conflict with it
Yeah,
at
it
all?
would be,
Okay.
that thing would be citywide, right?
Great,
Yeah.
okay, okay, I didn't realize it was citywide, I
Yeah.
thought it was just, my last, major important comment would be to specify a minimum number of liveaboards, that liveaboards are allowed to continue, that anyone who's running a marina must continue them,
Must.
that we must allow liveaboards.
No other criteria, just must
No-
allow for it.
Can't throw them out, gotta have them.
Leave the day in and day out operations up to that leaseholder, but
Yeah.
you've got to allow for them.
Yeah, it's an important part of our housing plan, honestly. It provides, security on the docks. There's a lot of reasons for it. Let's see. I said that was my last major comment. Another major comment, my very last major comment is still marina management. I am concerned about going to one single manager for most of the slips. You had asked if we had studied this, if we'd ever looked at it. I realize I'm now the old guy on the commission. Back in December of 2019, we did a study, Lori and Elizabeth did it, and we found that most of the area marinas are run by city or county, that we're one of the few with these public-private partnerships. And we do give away some of the funding. And on the other hand, we're also still on the hook to repair some of the hard infrastructure, around those parking lots and things. So, I've always kind of questioned the balance there. And I do really worry about having only one major leasehold for most of the slips and having that lease manager become a problem. Right now we've got 4 marinas, 3 of them are full, one's 10% empty. And so you'd say, hey, there's 4 marina managers. That should provide good competition. That should let you move to the one you want. It doesn't when 3 of them are full. And if we wound up in a situation where 90% of the slips were being poorly managed, we'd be in a tough spot with, very little recourse. So I worry a lot about having only one manager for all the slips. On the other hand, a reason I see a benefit for it is it would let us potentially combine marina offices and those little work yards. And those little, half-acre work yards, this marina is so tight on space. If we can recover some of those, that may give us room for dry boat storage and other important
Good point,
stuff.
yeah.
So,
And not to counteract your argument at all, I totally understand what you're saying about the consolidation of the marinas to one person or one managing group. The plan does carve out a few slips for King Harbor Yacht Club, does maintain the Portofino Hotel as having theirs. And then it actually, while it says Basin 3, Port Royal, and the rest of King Harbor should combine, it does have the option of, well, hey, maybe to redo the Pier Plaza area to be a hotel like we want, maybe we can add on the Basin 3 slips so that someone like the Portofino can operate a hotel and a slip basin in close proximity. So in that instance, you would have 3 or 4, albeit one would be
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
larger than the rest, but yeah.
I certainly see that.
Yeah.
Today, the King Harbor Yacht Club has a waiting list for slips. It's 50 spots long.
Right.
Portofino, very well managed. They manage several other hotels in marinas and manage slips. This isn't the only place that Noble House is doing that. They have only 3 slips open. So, I hear what you're saying, but those other 2 outlets, I guarantee are full and not really true outlets. Going on to some of my smaller questions, if I can. The Chart House isn't on here. Is that in Hermosa or is that not included?
That's one of the restaurants that we kind of grouped together.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right. Thanks. Let's see, one other thing I'd love to see mentioned in this plan is I do kind of like things in only one place. So if we're contemplating adding or changing leases to include Lana Kila and this is the place where we're doing all the lease changes, I would put that here so that you don't have to look at the amenities plan to see. And I kind of see that as where the nonprofits are, so you could put Montequila over there. But this is where we're doing all the leases. This is where we're doing all the business. This is already where we're doing educational
Yeah, I'm fine
carve-outs.
here too, yeah.
Let's do all the leases here. I would also, I mentioned including liveaboards in the marina's contract. I would also include dinghy docks in the marina contract. I know that's in the amenities plan, but I see this as the one place where we put leverage on the area businesses. And if we could get a dinghy dock in every basin, the mooring field gets used more and more and more. And you know, people may think it's silly, but if we turn that mooring field into a destination, it really will be nice. And if we can add a dinghy dock near the restaurants in each basin, we'll really see that get used. It'll really help. So this is where I would put pressure on the marina holder to put in a dinghy dock everywhere. I don't think there's anything else. I looked at it briefly. I don't think there's anything else in the amenities plan that we would need to put in any of these leases to make happen. I think we can make it all happen through the upgrades and the TIs and the turnover
Right.
over the next 10 years. But if there is anything else in the amenities plan that ought to be in a guideline, like you got to use some space for this, like the space for sailboat slips, you know, maybe that ought to be mentioned in this plan somewhere. Let's see. Another advantage to breaking these big leaseholds up into smaller leaseholds is it sort of allows us to focus the redevelopment. You mentioned that, you know, there's going to be a restaurant here and there. If you have a master leasehold, that master leasehold could become anything. You know, it could become a golf course. If you say this is a restaurant, when that gets redeveloped, you know, for the next 50 years and sea level rise, it's more likely to remain a restaurant. And one of the areas I see that being particularly important, you know, you mentioned finding the right master leaseholder being like finding a diamond in the rough.
Right.
One of the particular wrinkles in that to me is the King Harbor Yacht Club, which, you know, provides a lot of benefit. It's another nonprofit. It's got to be rebuilt for sea level rise. And how you find a master leaseholder, you know, diamond in the rough to go out and get the loan for that development, you know, that will be a hard thing to fold in. But if you give them their own lease, they can go out and get their own loans and do their own work and their own focus. We've mentioned parking lots. I'm opposed to putting new parking lots into this thing. You know, laying down a 50-year lease just boggles my mind. You know, we're not going to know, you know, we're all going to have flying cars in 50 years. We already have a lot of e-bikes, a lot of other devices. Maybe we'll get better bike paths. You know, maybe we'll all be getting ride share. We have Uber now. And, you know, probably not next year, despite what, you know, that guy said last week. But within 5 or 10 years, there may be self-driving cars. And so, you know, maybe someday we don't need as many parking lots as we do right now. And I hope that someday comes in less than 50 years. You know, parking lots are so permanent and so expensive. I would really hate to build one right now. So I like being silent on the bigger parking lots. And that's all I have. Oh, I have one last question. You mentioned that as we add nonprofits, we're losing revenue. One area we may gain revenue is by getting rid of the hoist. I know that the hoist is an expensive line item in the budget, and I'm not sure if that's a direct line in the city budget or something buried under the Redondo Marina maintenance, or if it's just maintained intermittently.
It's maintained by our property manager down at Basin 3.
Okay.
We pay for the fixes and the repairs, absolutely, it's a line item. The amenities plan, the direction from council was to have it removed. So with the inclusion of an actual boat launch, there will be a demolition of the boat hoist.
Yeah, okay. So those are all my comments. I I don't think that there's anything that significantly changes the document.
So what I'm hearing from Roger is name the nonprofits in the leases, require livable boards, don't manage them, but just require them. When you're negotiating with the marinas, require dinghy docks in all the basins. And you prefer being silent on the parking structure because we don't know what the parking situation is going to look like 20, 30, 40 years from now. And I had another note, probably from Commissioner Falk, which was call out dry boat storage. I don't know if you said that or if I just added that.
I didn't say that. I've been thinking about that, and I'm not sure if it belongs in the amenities plan because it's kind of a nonprofit and doesn't make money, or if it belongs in here if we're trying to force it onto a business.
Right.
And I was sort of thinking it could be, if we could manage to find a little more room for, perhaps across the street, for the boatyard. You know, if there's any one spot where a commercial entity runs dry boat storage for us, not small boat, not masked up, not perfect, but, you know, you see smaller boats in racks, moved in and out of racks by forklift. You know, if our boatyard operator were to have a forklift and a rack, they could potentially perform some dry boat storage for us.
Right.
But I'm hesitant to necessarily put that in here because we don't have the space for it now.
And we do address it in the amenities plan. We do have a subcommittee. We're not ignoring it. But I tend to agree. It could be an amenity or it could be a private-public partnership. Maybe it belongs in both documents because we don't know where it's going to be. I don't know.
And it probably takes moving a lease line, which to me is kind of ground ruled out by what you said. We have to assume we're on an island today with what we've got.
Right. And if we acquire new land, great. But if not, we got what we got.
Or if we end up finding the right master leaseholder who takes over all the marinas and that frees up space because now there's only one marina service yard, great. But you know, how many ifs was that?
Right. Right.
So yeah, those are my major actions.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for the time.
I have a couple questions and points. How would we enforce a maximum or minimum liveaboard requirement?
I mean, I think, you know, there'd be some oversight, right? We would have to, you know, probably physically go down there and verify that there's liveaboards down there. But if we just
If
made
they
it,
don't, now what?
right, now you're in breach of your lease and you go down that road, right?
I don't know enough about the liveaboard world to know why we would want to burden ourselves potentially and burden the master leaseholders with that requirement.
I will say in discussing the matter with specific master leaseholders, they view liveaboards as a good thing. To your point, they want them there. They're kind of the eyes and ears out there. They provide some security.
So if they want them there,
Right.
and we want them to have them there, I don't see why we have to have a requirement that would only potentially cause some stomach acid on their side if they can't. They're not finding them because they don't want them.
So if I may,
Yeah.
I would put this in the leases that get signed in 2032. I'm not sure when Portofino's up, a long time from now. So we had an issue several years ago, unfortunately during COVID, where one of our master leaseholders did not want liveaboards and was saying bye-bye to, you know, about 70 people, some low income, veterans, all that.
That's different. And that's them not
during
wanting them,
during
and that
COVID.
changes the whole.
And
Sure.
it was ugly and it's still a sore subject, frankly.
Sure, well, that's different. That's different than them wanting them and not getting them versus
And
them.
we
not
discovered
wanting them
that
at all.
unfortunately they're in a gray area where, you know, they weren't protected by normal COVID housing guidelines and they weren't mentioned in master leases. And so, you know,
Falls in the maritime
Yeah, I think
law.
I support more of a good faith efforts verbiage rather than a requirement, but
Okay.
that is a discussion for possibly a different time. I just wanted to to mention that. Where is the requirement for the parking spaces based on square foot? Where's that coming from?
So that comes from our municipal codes, specifically our zoning code. When it comes to businesses,
Zoning code for all of Redondo, not
all of
just for.
Redondo, yeah. So there's different zoning designations. We have very specific zoning designations that are called CC, coastal commercial, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Basically, you look at a chart, you say this type of business, restaurant requires a CUP in the CC2 zone, or it's not allowed, or it's permitted by right. In addition to that, then it has a parking requirement that says restaurants are usually the most impactful in terms of parking, but it's, 50 square feet for one parking stall for 50 square feet of dining area space as an example, right? So there's minimum thresholds, minimum requirements based on use and square footage of what you're using.
And how far, is it specified how far that space has to be from?
So when it comes to a shopping center, call like a Vaughn's grocery store shopping center that's got like your dry cleaners and everything else on the side, right? You've got one kind of sea of parking in the middle. When it comes to what's required, you take all that square footage, divide it by whatever the square, the calculation is, and you come up with 150 stalls. They build 175, we call it good, right? We don't physically tell you where you need to park, right? A lot of times in one of those scenarios, when you have a very successful restaurant, you got the dry cleaners right next door who puts up the dry cleaner and only parking because they're tired of how popular and how human nature works, in that I'm going to park as close to where I'm going as possible, right? But technically, no, there's no requirement if you wanted to park on the other end and walk all the way over. That's the shopping center field. That's kind of what we have out here. We've got a plethora of uses. We've got a plethora of commercial real estate, and we've got scattered surface parking lots and parking structures that service all of these needs. So when you look at the municipal code and you do the parking analysis for all the built environment out there, it'll say we need 1,100 stalls and we have 1,200. Okay, by code, we've got what we need. But realistically, as a King Harbor Yacht Club member, gonna park at the pier office parking structure and walk a mile to get to the King Harbor Yacht Club? No, he's not. He's gonna park as close as possible. So you may see a situation where you've got a parking impact in one area and a lot of parking available in another, but that's the human nature part of it, right?
You also don't have a crystal ball to know where the parking draw will be.
Right.
And the parking draw changes at 6 a.m., noon,
Correct.
4 p.m., and 10 o'clock at night.
Correct.
So I mention all this because at surface level, I do not like the idea of a parking structure. As you're driving down the coast, there's a parking structure. I think the Portofino point that you made, while valid that there is the 3-level Portofino, I think the Portofino is somewhat aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Whereas a parking structure tends to be cold looking. I don't know if that's the welcoming feeling we want as you're coming down the road into what I was hoping to be like a nice day at the beach or at the marina or at the pier. So surface level me thinks maybe the across the street's a good idea, but then you have issues of like parking lot full signs, knowing where people would be able to direct people to one parking lot versus another. People like you, to your point, aren't going to want to park across the street when they're going to want to be over there.
Right.
That parking lot will probably be the last one full. Right. It will, however, to Tom's point, it will be a revenue generator. So I think that is something to still consider. What I would like to see is a rendering of what the parking lot will look like, so we can get an idea of just how unsightly this will be.
Or how beautiful.
Or how,
Well, and what I'll also add is again, we're not approving the parking structure tonight. We're kind of approving the idea that if there is a parking situation, that staff at least look into the possibility of a parking structure. If we went down a road where we're really actually pursuing this, the parking structure itself would require entitlements, would require public outreach, would require, it would go
But I
through
do
the whole.
understand that based on the earlier discussion, it's not a matter of do we need parking? It's a matter of where do we put the parking because we're going to need it.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of where, not a matter of if.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah.
So I just want to echo other points that have been said to just possibly consider other places as well. Are there boat brokers that have shown interest in coming down to this area? To Commissioner
That's
Falk's
a really
point?
great question. It's an interesting dynamic with that Old Gold's Gym site. I'm assuming you're referring to the Old Gold's Gym site because we're
Well,
having
it's just to
struggle with.
Commissioner Falk's point that we should look into that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we purchased the site with Tideland's money, then restricting the number of uses that can actually go in there. And then in turn, created a master leasehold with Sonesta to operate it for us. So my department doesn't go out and look for a tenant for this site. What I do know is that Sonesta is having a really hard time finding a tenant for the site. And from what they've told me is that if they have a prospective user who seems to match the criteria, they kind of run away when they see the facility, right? So it's an interesting vacant square footage area. It's very unique. If you've ever been in there, the layout is very unique. So it may be that just the existing layout, whoever the broker is or whatever use it is that's looking at it, just kind of goes, forget it. I'm not sure. But again, that this document is just directing staff to work with Sonesta, remove the hurdles, if you will, and try to get that place filled, whether we remove the Tidelands restrictions or not, right? Let's just get it filled.
I love the idea of having more of a scuba diving environment down there. I think that especially with the educational facility, really capitalize on the whole idea. I don't know if it's a part of what we're talking about today, but just something to be in the back of all of our minds that maybe we can incorporate. That's a very good business. I think we could capitalize on that nobody else in the area has.
It's a really good point. It is a part of this discussion. We've got our list of preferred uses. I think scuba would fit into one of those categories. But if you want, we could directly call out scuba as a preferred use, you know?
I mean, I'm a scuba diver, so I'm obviously biased. But I do think that it would be great to have more scuba divers. Well, that's necessarily true. Because I don't necessarily scuba dive with other scuba divers, but that's a discussion for a different day. I do think that, especially if we're gonna be teaching people, if you teach people about the stars and astronomy, they'd much rather be astronauts and go into space. I think that if we're teaching people about the ocean and what we have in our, right next door, I think then we could sort of parlay that into some scuba diving component. And I don't know, maybe if there's a scuba diving shop, if a dive shop wants to sort of glom onto that and be like the designated one, like in there, maybe they have like classes that they run from there. I don't know. That's not what I do for a living, so I don't know. But I think that's something that could be explored. How similar are the leases? So I like the idea of us sort of separating them out based on the use. And it's a fantastic idea. Not just because the management companies are some specific item may be outside their strike zone, but also in structuring these leases, I imagine, are our leases all like sort of a template that we use in?
Not
Or are they
really.
very different?
And they're all very different and they're all very old, especially with these master leases that have been around for 60, 75 years. So we're going to be building new leases up from the ground up. Every document that we renegotiate is going to be a brand new document, modernized. But to your point, yeah, it's very specific to the uses themselves. A restaurant, for example, we would get percentage rent on. An office complex, we don't. We get like a base rent, right? I mean, that's a very obvious thing, but they do differ quite a bit.
Sure. And then, CAM and taxes, insurance, all that stuff has to be different. But I'm also there are gonna be different requirements for a restaurant than there would be for a paddleboard shop, or there would be for a gym, or there would be for a parking lot or for a marina. So I think that when it does come time for us to work on these new leases, I think it's imperative that we do this with our eyes towards the future, and have leases that we can evolve with rather than leases that will outgrow.
I'm just making a note.
That is all that I have. Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I guess, is there, right now, could we do a small economic analysis on like what we do at the International Border Act? Today, we manage that, the
Right.
city does. And then I don't know what the master lease, like the structure of the master lease, how it would look as far as how much revenue would be then going to the master leaseholder versus then goes to the city. Because we do lose, I mean, one of the downsides, of course, is you lose a ton of control, and the control then moves to the master leaseholder, an awful lot of it, and you have to pre-think as much as you can. It's like to Roger's point on the liveaboards. If you don't have anything in the lease contract, then you don't have any leverage at all. So it's these kinds of things if they get listed, then at least the city now has a button to push, right? And to
Well,
say,
I do want to touch on this because this is probably the biggest topic that I've heard tonight is, do we even get into the master lease business? The trade-off is, we don't have the money to rebuild this stuff. So if the idea is we're going to stay away from master leases, and that could be the consensus here, I'm not saying it's not. If it is, then we're essentially going to be allowing these existing master leases to expire, and the city will take over complete management and ownership of all the buildings, and then we'll eventually have to rebuild each and every one.
Who will do this?
Or-
Who will manage it?
Exactly.
well, also maybe a combination of stuff, right? Right now, today, we are managing some stuff, right? The city is.
Right.
And just comparing, because generally speaking, in most harbors, how it's done is they're managing their money. Now, I mean, there's some issues, but they're accumulating enough money so that they can renovate their own buildings and they're managing it correctly, rather than having a master leasehold on top who is, they have a revenue for them, which is lost from the city, is what which is an obvious thing. It would just be interesting to see what that looks like from a small point of view. And from the International Boardwalk, we could in a way do it if we have to think about what that master lease looks like, how much he's going to have to pay for the master leasehold per month, right? Versus how much we're generating from the current International Boardwalk businesses. It just would be an interesting thing to look at. I get though, right now, because of past history, Redondo is behind the 8 ball. We don't have a money. If you're running this right, you would have to have money socked away for.
Yeah. So what I'll say is, in 2018, there was a sea level rise assessment that was done. We don't have the economic analysis that you're talking about. But that sea level rise assessment talked about all of the existing commercial infrastructure that was out there and what we would need to do to those buildings to accommodate for sea level rise. And to accommodate for sea level rise, you either have to build a wall a little bit higher, you have to build your pad level where your building sits, the elevation of where your building sits higher, or you have to retreat. It's usually a combination of all that stuff. It's not a one solution fits all, but it estimated in 2018, it would be over $500 million for us to take on that venture. That's probably a lot more now. So this is very much in the purview of you tonight, is to consider not doing master leases altogether. I want to hammer home, there's no money for this. We don't make that much money.
Right. Well, when it comes to sea level rise, there should be hopefully federal government money that's going to, not yet. No, not yet.
Not yet, and that's really going to be increasing our seawall heights,
Right.
increasing the pad levels, things like that. But like redevelopment of the structures themselves.
No, I know, it's rough. I mean, you could see in the Pier Plaza area, for instance, limping along more and trying to fit in, putting money aside with the idea that you are going to be then redeveloping these buildings. I mean, buildings can last a very long time if they're cared for. there isn't a life, I mean, there's thousands of years old buildings, right? I mean, if you care for them, you can make them last for a very long time. And you can make them look good as well. It just, it's possible. It's just, I mean, we know that it's a tough issue, but I wouldn't suggest that we don't do any master leaseholds. That's, that it's an all or nothing thing. I'm just wondering, we spent a lot of money buying some of these leaseholds to begin with, right? In preparation for.
Well, in preparation for this, now we can actually do what we want to do out there.
Right, because it
Yeah.
gives us flexibility in it. And
Gives
it was-
flexibility to negotiate with someone who will do our bidding.
That's right, yeah. So it's, yeah.
I mean, that's money spent though.
Money spent,
Yeah,
correct.
It
so
is money spent.
that we don't have, that's gone. So I think where we are today, we have no option but to do the master leases. We had no option.
No,
because we can't afford to. We can't afford to. I would rather have somebody else paying me and have them have to worry about what they're putting people in the spots. I'm still getting my money. I also haven't had to spend a bunch of money on improvements that may require leveling and building new.
You said master lease, and I think you may mean lease as
Lease.
opposed to direct ownership by the city.
Yes, I apologize. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Sorry.
Correct. I think that's, I mean, if we don't have the money to build new and to put these improvements in, I don't think we have much of a choice.
Yeah, and I kind of move towards still having a blend somehow. I see your point, certainly. The downside, of course, to a master lease holder is they make a lot of money being a master lease holder, right? And that is money that would have normally flowed into one of the funds that
But
then
that master
support.
leaseholder had to put money in.
Well, absolutely. I mean,
They're
and
bearing all the risk.
basically what I'm saying is that being a master leaseholder is lucrative. It's something that, and it's one of the reasons why you don't see that replicated around a lot of different harbors is because it's very lucrative, right? So
And I don't disagree with that, but I think the issue is that we don't have that option.
yeah, exactly. No, I know. That's,
You guys might be talking past each other. I'm sorry. You're talking about getting a lease so that we have a public-private partnership and it's on that private business to do the rebuild
Yes.
and get the loan and so forth.
Yes.
And you're talking about having a master lease where you have a middleman, if you will, managing, more than one restaurant.
that's right.
And what this document would do over time, as these leases come up, is I think this would eliminate, after this document were done, 50 years from now, and all the leases turned over, we'd wind up with
A few master leases.
a few master leases. There would be potentially one for the market hall, potentially also
Hall,
over the small businesses on
Boardwalk,
International Boardwalk.
Maison Ritz, RDR, like Tony's and those
Yeah,
businesses right
the
there.
traditional master lease on the pier and the Mondstadt Pier.
And then the grouping of restaurants in Basin 1, the gym, the chart house, there's
Yeah.
like 2 or 3 right there.
Yeah, where you have some small offices.
Right.
So I've always had, I've never really understood our policy in master leaseholds, because in some places we have a master leasehold that's like the whole north end of the harbor, and in other places, I'll pick on the Spy Factory, they're gone now. We have a direct lease from the city with a guy who's like, 15 square feet.
Right.
So I like the way this cleans things up and clarifies where we're having direct leases, where we're having masters. Having a master leasehold for the market hall makes sense to me.
And I'll tell you this, having a master leasehold that brings together all of the peer businesses, that makes it easier for the city to communicate with that master leasehold and get expectations. Where what we're creating with direct leaseholds with an apartment complex, with the hotel, they're direct leaseholds with one leasehold. They're significant though. They're very large in terms of what the volume
worth
of what
the
they
trouble.
produce. Yeah, right.
I see.
And I just wanted to say, the plan that's before you isn't a one size fits all. There's still some individual leases for, like Shade Hotel, for Blue Water Grill, for
Complex.
Cheesecake Factory. But then it takes those ones that are basically one building or a set of close by buildings that are small spaces. And, somebody's got to be responsible for the building that they're sharing. And the city has proven to be terrible at that. And we're actually terrible at taking care of most buildings. I mean, that's why we have a bond going on right now for the fire halls, right? So, you know, I wanted to get the city out of the small leasehold business and get people who understand how to do that well. And to give them a long-term lease and incentivize them to invest in recreating those buildings that are not well cared for. And we also know that particularly in the harbor, there was willful neglect for almost 2 decades prepping for the Center Cal project. And that was willful.
Yeah.
And for the city to recover from that, we're not going to know. To the seawall, I know we've applied for seawall funds from the feds and the infrastructure grants and the shovel-ready projects. And the big ports got stuff, but none of us recreational harbors got any of it. So that will have to come from the feds or the state in the future, but right now, there's nothing there. And we've tried, we explored putting it on the leaseholders, and it's very obvious that ain't gonna happen. So we're gonna have to take care of some of the big infrastructure stuff. I don't think, from what I've seen in the city, and Greg's shop is 3 people right now, maybe going to 4, and he's responsible for economic development in the whole city and the harbor. We don't have the wherewithal for them to keep running all of this stuff. And so that's why you see what you see before you, the bigger buildings that can stand on their own and, and incite investment from companies like Chart House, leave those alone, but those smaller, the ones that get the mom and pop shops that the kids love to go buy their churros or a slice of pizza, let some other vendor do that does it elsewhere. And not all harbors are the same size. Marina Del Rey, most of it is done by others, right? It's not done by the city. Some of Port of LA is, and some is consolidated into, like Alta Sea is one giant leaseholder that's leasing out small things for research on the waterfront. And you have Cabrillo Marina down there, and what's the next one? Holiday Harbor. So those are slips run by private companies. So there isn't a one size fit all in any, in the harbors across the state. So just wanted to add into the discussions that were going on. I would like to cover a little on the parking. There were two strategies in the parking. One, we got a very good study from Port Royal that says they don't use near the percentage that they have to allocate, per slip. And it's a very detailed multi-year study that shows that's below. So one of the strategies, we know we're gonna have to create parking. We know we can't create parking off-site right now because we can't say there's a shovel-ready project to do it. So one of them is to go to the Coastal Commission to get them to reduce that, and that will create some parking for us. The second is to try to consolidate those lots that are ill-configured, and the best example of that is that Portofino and the 2 city lots, the Triton oil site. If you look at it from overhead, there's all sorts of different angles, and we're losing parking because it's all chopped up. And so to consolidate those, and if we have to go up one level, no more than one level. I know, look, I'm anti-parking structure, but if you have to put it one place in the harbor, that is, first off, it's what's allowed by Measure C. It's what the Coastal Commission referenced when we were selling Measure C. And there is no view there today because of the hedges, the trailers, and Portofino. So that's, and I hope we don't have to go there, but it provides, an overflow capability when that comes about. Otherwise, we'll get to a point where we go, well, we got this guy ready to go do the market hall, but we can't do it until we find parking, and so we get stalled. So that's just my response to the comments that I'm hearing tonight.
Okay.
Well, hang on, because you may have more comments. What happens if we don't have the parking?
Well, if you don't include it in the vision tonight,
No, I'm
obviously-
sorry, what happens if we don't have, what happens if we just say, you know what, forget it, let's not do the parking. We have enough spaces, even if we don't, if we violate our municipal code,
Right.
what happens?
any new development wouldn't be permitted without a variance of some kind, allowing for insufficient parking, which would then go to the Coastal Commission. It's
And-
likely not, no development likely.
And so when do we have to have, so say we need 1,200 spots total. Do we have to have 1,200 spots available 24 hours a day?
There are options for shared parking. You see it a lot of times with shared facilities that have churches in them, where the church is open on Sundays and there's restaurants in there Monday through Saturday. It's a case-by-case scenario where you go to the planning department, the harbor commission, and you get some kind of a use permit that shows how it works. But it's an entitlement that can be approved.
And we are constrained by Measure C because of what happened during the Center Cal debacle when they allocated no parking for recreational uses and just said, well, there's extra at different times of the day. So we mandated in Measure C and was approved by the Coastal Commission that the recreational uses have to have set aside parking for them that is not shared with the commercial components.
Got it. Okay.
But I do hope for driverless cars sometimes. And
To be honest, it makes parking tough because parking structures are so expensive. They're literally about 60 to 75K per parking stall when you build a parking structure. And they last 50, 75 years. So the question that Roger had is true. Well, how bad are we going to need it 30 years from now if things keep going the way they're going, right?
right. And we're probably closer to that than we think.
I hope so.
I mean, they're definitely in Scottsdale, the driverless cabs.
Any comments from the public? Anybody on Zoom or?
No e-comments and no participants.
Resident
Wait,
Hanson.
we have someone from the public? I apologize.
Yeah, I recognize that guy.
Good evening, Commissioners, staff, Mark Hanson, King Harbor boater. This is absolutely great to see us moving forward. Of course, I served on the amenities plan with Commissioner Carlson and Suzanne and Walters, and this was what was always intended, and it's just great to see it happening, the second phase. And I really want to thank the mayor and the waterfront director for the hard work. I know you guys are up to version 4 already. Before you're here, you're doing a great job. The Commodore King Harbor Yacht Club's here, so I'm not going to say much at all about King Harbor Yacht Club because he can say whatever he wants to say. I'll make just a very general comment that I go to a lot of yacht clubs, versus Commodore King Harbor Yacht Club and Commodore Southern California Yachting Association, and then as a small catamaran racer, so I've been to a lot of clubs. And what I want to tell for you who haven't been to these, there's a fantastic dynamic that happens when a yacht club has slips. Okay, the two feed each other. It will make slips and a yacht club that even more affluent boaters will want to come spend their money here. So I just wanted to provide that. Anyway, hopping into the document itself, I noticed on page 12, there was a great sentence in there that said, it was talking about the Redondo Beach Marina. It said that the marina shall not force out coastal-related uses through inflated sublease rates and fees. I thought that was such a great line. I want to suggest to you that you pick that up, plagiarize it, and put it right up front in the executive summary. Just phrase it a little more general and say the city and master leaseholders shall not force out coastal-related uses through inflated sublease rates and fees. That's consistent with the Coastal Act, and I think it would just be a great thing for us to say up front. I want to touch just for a second on the AS site. We all realize that that's not part of current waterfront planning, but in the back of our minds or the front of our minds, we all recognize that, and you guys, the Harbor Commission wrote things on this some time back, that the site would be a perfect location to provide overflow parking and could be an ideal site for dry boat storage. So you've talked a lot about parking, but we all know in the back of our minds, hopefully one of these days we're going to have a little more elbow room there. I want to come down, dry boat storage. I absolutely support Commissioner Falk's comments on that, and I completely support the waterfront director's analysis. When I was typing stuff over the last couple of days, I typed it in the very same manner as wet boat storage in the marina slips. Dry boat storage is a recreational amenity and a commercial amenity, so I think it does belong in both documents, and I always actually assumed that a marina operator would manage this. I've done quite a bit of typing here. Can I steal some more time from you guys?
Motion to extend.
Second.
Well, thank you very, very much. I do remember during the amenities plan that there was talk about that maybe the city would manage it, but I always thought the opposite. And I had the benefit of having worked really close with King Harbor Marina on the Moby Master Plan when they told us that they would like to manage it, which made all the sense in the world. You already take in rent for boats in the water. They're perfect guys to take in rent for dry boat storage also. So I totally support the idea of it being in both documents. Lana Keelan and Outrigger Canoe Clubs, yeah, I think that would be great to mention them in this document. They've been trying to, get a long-term leases for us for decades. On the subject of the parking structures, having again been up and down the coast a lot, I can tell you they are very uncommon, maybe non-existent in West Coast harbors. And I would suggest we put a sentence in that says sufficient uncovered parking should be maintained for recreational boating users. And obviously, as it was discussed, maybe Gold's Gym is a place for some parking. On the Gold's Gym, it said that the site is undesirable for most uses allowed under tidelands restrictions. I'm going to disagree with that. I think that could be a potential location for marine stores, boat dealers, boat brokerages, and tackle shops. They don't have to be on our side of, on the harbor side of Harbor Drive. And yes, as Commissioner Falk said, yeah, it'd be good to call out the terms marine chandleries, boat dealerships, and brokerages. And yes, I've talked to two yacht brokers who said they would be interested. I also wanted to point out, we talked about marina sail, but we also have South Bay Sailing and Redondo Beach City Sailing. We might want to call those out just to acknowledge their existence. And I think that covers all my high points. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Hello, my name is Andrew Beggs. I am the 2024 Commodore of King Harbor Yacht Club, and I'm also a board member of King Harbor Youth Foundation. Both of these organizations exist here on Mole. Both are not-for-profit organizations. And we really coexist as a kind of a binary star. The Yacht Club is a 501c7, a member benefit organization where we pool our money to create benefits such as the use of our hoists and dry boat storage. And the Youth Foundation is a 501c3, a not-for-profit philanthropy that is the primary sailing education system for the Redondo Beach children all the way through high school, including some of the other communities. I just want to point out that, first of all, I'm deeply appreciative of this conversation and this proposal. I'm so excited to see the growth and the development in King Harbor Marina. As the longest continuous occupant of this marina, King Harbor Yacht Club is heavily invested, in fact, exclusively invested in this location and in this marina and in this city. We have no other interests. We have no other properties. We have nowhere else where we focus our time and energy and our money except for the King Harbor Marina and the city of Redondo Beach. And it is our greatest desire to see this marina live up to its amazing potential to be an exciting, safe, clean, and vibrant marina. And we don't just want this to happen, we are willing and interested in rolling up our sleeves and working hard to make it happen. So we appreciate you, and you can count on King Harbor Yacht Club and the Youth Foundation. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Anybody on Zoom?
No, anybody else?
No.
No one in Zoom, no e-comments.
All right. Then moving right along.
How do we want to go about
Oh, yes. We have to figure out what we're going to do now.
get some closure here? I've got some notes. You can also nominate one of yourselves to write a letter on behalf of the Harbor Commission. To summarize, I can kind of go over what I've heard. I don't know if anybody else was taking notes, but I heard name nonprofits in the leases. I've heard require liveaboards, but potentially just have some looser language in there that have your best efforts to allow for them, but not a strict requirement. That might be something we need to decide on right there. Require dinghy docks in future leases for all the basins, regardless if it's one marina operator or a few. Call out dry boat storage as something that's desired because it could be a private-public partnership and not just an amenity. I've heard two options on parking, the preference to remain silent on it and allow for the parking dilemma to kind of shape itself and, you know, figure out what we got to do when push comes to shove, or consider other areas besides the Port Royal surface parking lot. Maybe have looser language that just recognizes the need for a parking lot and to look for anything north of Portofino Way.
We have no idea how many spaces we need. Is that correct?
No, we have zero idea.
So this could be a 7-story parking structure.
Well, no, you know, we might call out a 2-story structure in this document, but if it results in, you know, the Armageddon scenario where we need 10,000 spaces, we're just not going to be able to do new development until we figure out off-site situations, to be honest with you.
So do we have a limit where we are comfortable right now of a parking structure? 2-story, 3-story, how many spaces are we
I mean,
talking?
right now, it's written as 2 stories, replacing a surface lot with a 2-story parking structure.
What will that net us?
And Measure C requires only two. We can't go higher than 2, right? That's it.
And what will that
mean,
put a dent in this?
One,
The zoning is 45 feet.
Right.
So, and Center Cal somehow crammed 5 layers into that. But right now, this document's written ground and one, maximum of 1 on top of that.
Right.
And we don't know if that will put a dent in our needs or not.
No idea.
Okay.
It'll just help.
So I would discuss 2 possible motions. One, we take the 4 or 5 items Greg just listed, and we make a decision on parking, and we say, Greg, write a letter for us. The other one is we have a lot of minor comments, which I think, you know, improve the document, add detail to the document. We have comments from 2 commission members, the comments from the public, comments we made here tonight. So we could potentially write a longer letter saying, these are the 4 or 5 bullets, I'm sorry, I lost count, that we really feel strongly about, and here's other things that we respectfully present to the author of this document to consider. And that puts a bow around, you know, all of our comments, even the smaller ones, puts them into the record, even if it's not, you know, the absolute final record. I'm willing to write that letter. So
I think
I'm
that's a good
discussing
route.
2 possible different paths here. And if anybody else has, you know, a 3rd or a 4th option, I'm certainly willing to hear it.
I'll tell you, I think that's a good option because it identifies the 4 or 5 or 6 issues that you really have an opinion on. But when it comes to rewording the executive summary or the introduction to add a sailing club here or there, we could probably just make that adjustment, you know? So, but if you have one letter that details everything, staff can add the superlative items and then relay to council, these are the big ticket items that you're actually concerned with.
And, you know,
Yeah.
as proposed in this, I'm interested to see what
Yeah.
you 2 would prefer as well.
So I don't mind taking the individual inputs that we've gotten from the commissioners and from the public and integrating those, so long as you guys agree with them. You know, and a lot of those are pen and ink. I don't think anybody would have problems with them, but, you know, there's a couple, you know, you mentioned that there is some, it seems there is some different directions the commission has indicated here. If you could come to consensus on those, like those big things, and if you can do it tonight and just list them to Greg, we can work on them. I don't want to create work for you.
I think it's,
You know, generating a letter when you're
Yeah.
regurgitating pen and ink stuff that we've already got. And I think most of those are easy to
Yeah,
accommodate.
the two I have is the liveaboard issue, either requiring them or having looser language, and the parking, either being silent on it and just letting kind of zoning and development standards work their way through it, or actually being okay with identifying a two-story parking structure as being needed, either at the site that's proposed or being more vague and just saying anywhere where you can find it north of Portofino Way.
Well, if we don't say anything, I don't see a reason to agree to the parking structure right now. It will either be required and they'll do it, or it won't be required and then they won't. So I think that will shake itself out as zoning gets done anyways. We don't even know what this is gonna do for our parking needs.
I also feel we'll get smarter as we do in just like a few months when we do the boat ramp traffic and parking study.
Yep.
We should just stay there.
One thing I would on
Sit
parking,
closer.
if you can agree to the strategy of reducing the parking requirement for the marinas based on the study from
Kevin Ketchum.
Kevin Ketchum, which will have to come to you because it's going to be eventually be an LCP, but at least agreeing with that strategy as an approach and the potential of consolidating the lots.
Yes.
The city lots with Kevin Ketchum's lot right along Portofino and Harbor
Right.
to get more parking out of the existing ground parking that's there. That would be,
Can
I
it
would
be
like
more-
that direction.
Can it be worded such that we do them in that order? As opposed to seeing how many, so we need X number of spaces. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is we're going to rework the spaces that are currently there that are just sort of, that aren't.
Efficient.
Efficient, yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Do that first. Then see where that will get us. Then from there, go on to, there were two things you said. I forget what the first one was.
Lowering the parking threshold for
Yes,
marinas.
yes.
So I'd actually recommend the opposite because we have front run that with the Coastal Commission and they're willing to look at that.
Then those two can be flipped, that's
Okay.
fine. I just want the parking structure to be our third
Understood.
option.
And that's still, we can kick the can down the road and when we need that for parking, come back. So,
Yeah. Okay.
thanks.
Okay, I think we're clear on parking. Thank you.
Should we grapple the liveaboard requirement versus strong language encouraging
only-
liveaboards?
My only concern with having strong language in there is if we run into a situation where we have to enforce it and we don't, it's now a wasted provision. Or we don't have to spend the money in suing our, essentially, the person who's running all these other
Our
slips.
partner, right?
Yeah, that is not a business you want to get in, is suing your partners.
I appreciate that. What I would propose is making sure we put it into the new leases when they happen in 2032.
That it's a requirement?
Yeah.
I agree with that as well, because it does, without something being in the lease, you
And-
have,
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I was just going to say, then there's a long way between this guidance document and a lease 8 years from now.
right.
So now it is 2032. And we have this strict language in place that requires 10, I don't know, is that inadequate, is that appropriate? Say, so assuming an argument to 10.
2%.
And Bob and Mary Inc., who are running these slips, only find 7. So not for their efforts, they can only find 7. Now what do we do?
I think we write the lease more carefully than that and just say, thou shalt accommodate liveaboards. Liveaboards shall be an option in the harbor.
That I agree with. But if we're requiring a number, a set,
No.
we're just
I'm-
requiring more than 0.
I'm just saying, some marinas say, no liveaboards here. None. No. And I want our marinas to say, liveaboards are an option here. We accommodate them. There's extra fees, there's extra rules.
I agree completely with
Every
that.
other dock, whatever.
I don't agree with a floor, but unless the floor is 0, I agree with that completely.
Great, okay.
Okay. Tom, Lee?
As far as liveaboards, I've thought about this too. I'm trying to remember, I think King Harbor Marina, I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but I know they, at least originally when there was like a limit, you can only have 2 liveaboards per dock. And I think there was some percentage overall, which I think actually may have been a coastal commission rule. But I don't see it being a problem is if we tell them they have to, like, there's a waiting list for liveaboards. At least there used to be. My understanding is it's still, in fact, it's so much that people will move off their boats, but they will keep their liveaboard status. So I think if you just come up with, say, you need to allow, 2 per dock or, some percentage. And then of course, the only question becomes is if, they don't have that percentage, and the question becomes why. And, if somebody could, hey, I tried to get a liveaboard here and Joe's Marina, and they turned me away and said there was no room. And well, Joe's only got 3 liveaboards for his 300 slip marina. Then we can go look at something. I think we can write something that'll work something like that.
Yeah.
So there is some, you have to allow this much, but we can make it flexible enough that it's also somewhat market driven.
So establishing a floor, but having an out clause? That's different than what
Right.
Right now.
Commissioner Abelman said.
And I agree as well. I'd like to see a percentage, basically, it could be a low percentage, like 2% or 1% or whatever of the number of, but yeah, a minimum, because it's something that is desired. I don't think it's gonna, you are gonna have a situation where there aren't enough liveaboards, that not enough demand.
But you're both saying, unless I'm mishearing you, you're both saying that it's a requirement of them to have a percentage available to be liveaboards.
Yes,
But you're not saying they have to have that percentage full.
that's right.
Correct,
I'm okay
yeah,
with
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are typically,
Those are very different, those are very different things. One is we're requiring them to have a set number. You have to have available 5 slips for liveaboards. But you don't have to have them, but if you can't fill them, now they're just gonna have empty slips, or are they gonna be able to put somebody else in, have to kick
No, but
somebody
the
out?
next available slip that comes up, and they've only.
I like that,
You're right.
I like that.
yeah, there should be, reasonable, standard, typical liveaboard density guidelines. It shouldn't be one in the whole marina, it shouldn't be any old slip. Usually it's like, a couple on each dock, or no more than every other slip or something like that.
I agree with that.
And really, that's my heartburn that I have, of course, with master leases, is they last for so long. And if, unless you have something in your lease, there's nothing you can do, right? The guy, a master leaseholder can say, yep, I'm banning liveaboards. And the city would not be able to do anything about that because you're not able to alter that 50-year lease.
Sure. And again, I was never saying that we should say that they could never be silent on it. I was just saying that at first, it was the idea was posed, at least my understanding of it was, that we are going to require them to have 10 people living there
At all times.
at all times. As soon as someone moves out, you better find somebody or we're suing you. And that isn't what we're now talking about. We're now talking about is you have to allocate X number of slips for liveaboards.
Yeah.
And if somebody comes and you don't have a slip available for them, then they get the next available one, so long as you don't already have those 10 slips full.
Right.
But you could have more if you wanted to. Okay, yeah, I think we all agree then.
Yeah, and of course, when you develop the master leases, there's a lot of study that goes involved in these, I'm sure, developing. I mean, oh my gosh, it's like brain surgery, somewhat, maybe not quite brain surgery, but.
They're over 100 pages.
Yeah, I mean,
there.
yeah. Yeah, I would think. It'd be really difficult because they are so long. I guess I understand why they're long, but it's unfortunate.
I think that narrows down those 2 points.
Yeah, and I think we've got direction on all the other points. You feel good about,
If you captured them.
yeah.
Okay, so which option do you guys prefer? We send you
I
those
think you
four main
just let
points, or we
us-
send you the whole
I
letter?
think you let us encapsulate what we just heard, adjust the document where needed, and it moves forward with amendments.
So no letter than required.
Okay. I move what Greg said.
Second.
Awesome.
All right.
Have a vote?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Just as a comment, as an aside, if you take any lease that you currently is vacant, like the RDR spot, if you lower the price on what he's trying to get there, of course, it would eventually lease. I mean, if you said it was going to be $1 a month, somebody would be in there. You see what I mean? And we have no control over that as,
Well, the document says explore why it's empty, and it might be, it needs to reduce the rent. I mean,
okay.
there's no solution there, it just says staff, see if you can get that thing filled, you know?
So I'd like to make a second motion that we do write a letter, and I'll suggest drafting it, saying that the Harbor Commission very much likes this document and would like the,
Oh, okay.
Is this a second
Council-
motion or a different motion?
this is a second motion.
Okay, so let's vote on the
So
first one.
the first motion was, here's the edits we propose to the document.
We'll make
But
them.
I'm thinking about this document for the last 30 seconds, and this is an important document, and with or without these changes, I really want the city council to pass it, and I really want to state that this commission is very strongly in favor of this document. Dear city council, please pass it. You know,
Yep.
thank you for letting us consider it. Please pass it. So
So let's
I'd
vote on
like-
the first one first, and then,
I thought we already had, I'm sorry.
oh,
Hey, well, I think we
Okay,
did.
I
So-
apologize.
so you moved,
What Greg said.
Greg writes it,
Yep.
then Tom seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion one passes.
Okay, now I'll make a second motion saying, offering to draft a letter from the Harbor Commission saying that the Harbor Commission, you know, appreciates consideration of this, is strongly in favor of this document, and would like the city council to, you know, consider it, bless it, and pass it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right,
We got there.
we did it.
Managed to do it.
Thanks for stopping by, Jim.
We still have, okay. Item L2, discussion and possible action regarding a draft commercial plan for King Harbor.
L3.
It was just discussed, so now we're gonna go on to L3.
See, you're great at this.
Yeah, you're good at it, yeah. That's smooth, smooth.
I just had so much fun with it.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Let's do it again. One more time.
Like, it sounds awfully familiar. L3, discussion and possible action regarding the November 11th Harbor Commission meeting.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward, guys. It's a holiday on November 11th. City Hall's closed. This room won't be available. We got a vote to cancel it, pick it up in December, which I think is December, let me look at my calendar here. It'll be, the next one we go to would be December 9th, where I would recommend, well, I don't have anything slated for December 9th just yet. I think we should just meet before the end of the year. I could, if anything, give a really in-depth, detailed director's report. And we can all see each other before the new year.
Motion to cancel the November meeting, and
Yeah.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Awesome.
Items from staff, director's report.
Yeah, I've got a director's report for you. Couple items here. The new public boat launch project, obviously we got into contract. I announced that last time. Project kickoff with the actual consultant occurred on September 4th. On September 17th, myself, Dave Shirobi, I don't know if Mio was there or not, but we did a site walk of all of Moldine, just kind of got them used to the lay of the land, if you will. They're on the precipice of starting all those studies that we were just talking about. Wave attenuation, I think the buoys are going in on the 18th, and that'll be in for a year, so we can study the waves that are out there. Parking study, traffic study, circulation study, demand study. They're gonna look at the closest boat launches around us, somehow calculate the pent-up demand for a boat launch and figure out how many people they think are gonna visit specifically to use the new boat launch. And that'll dictate how many lanes we have to create. Obviously, there's spatial constraints, but if DBA is paying for this, they wanna make sure that whatever we're building isn't overkill. We're not doing 6 lanes where only two are needed, right? So we think that's gonna take about 4 to 6 months, starting next week. Once we have those studies done, we'll likely call a meeting of the subcommittee to kind of go over the results before we actually get into design considerations, just to review it as a group. International Boardwalk pavers, that has been ongoing. We're actually ahead of schedule. That was supposed to go into, I think, the end of this month, and we're probably about a week away from being done. So they were able to get it done pretty quickly. If you go out there, I recommend you go out there. It looks really good. It's huge. To me, it actually looks wider somehow. I don't know if that's possible, but it looks wider. Our blade sign project continues to move forward. All of our tenants on International Boardwalk are getting city-funded blade signs. Mio's working this one up. We're starting to get designs in from our tenants. The deadline was this week to get that done. There's some stragglers, but we accommodated for that in the schedule. As soon as we get all of them, we're hopeful we'll get that in the next couple of weeks. We'll start the permitting process at our building and safety department and installation. And installation is not going to take that long. It's, maybe a week or so. So those things will get up real quick. The sea bass grow out pens, we're under contract with Clark McNulty. Craig Stanton, our property manager down at Basin 3, is helping out as well. They are in the process of procuring materials. They're under contract. They're going to be developing the pens off-site, and bringing them over to drop them in. Mio's working with our coastal development permit application process. It's a 6 to 8 month contract. Do you remember what it was?
9 months.
9 months, which was a lot longer than we thought. It's a lot longer than it takes to build some pens, but the unknown is the coastal development permit waiting period. It's not going to be a full-blown hearing or anything, but we weren't sure about how long that process would take. She's starting that now from the onset to see what we can do. If we can get it done faster than 9 months, we absolutely will. Seaside Lagoon, we're going tomorrow to City Council to talk about the Seaside Lagoon, which you guys talked about last meeting. Once City Council gives us ultimate direction, the entitlement process begins, the environmental reports begin. We think we'll be in front of this commission again within 1 year. I'll go a little further. I'll say within 9 to 10 months, we'll be in front of this commission for said design review entitlement. And within the year, we'll be at least on the Coastal Commission's radar. I don't know if we'll get in front of a hearing before the end of the year, but our application will be submitted and we'll just be waiting for that date to occur for them to place us on an agenda. I don't have any updates for you on the old Joe's Crab Shack site just yet. We do have a prospective tenant. It's the Marine Mammal Care Center. We're meeting every Tuesday during closed session to negotiate. It's ongoing.
The group from Long Beach.
Yeah.
The ones that they did the
release. Yep. That group. Breakwater repair project, no updates from the last delay. If you remember, we were on schedule. And then I think 2 meetings ago, I said that the U.S. Army Corps told us that there was a delay. They're running into issues with the state water board right now. It has less to do with our specific project and more to do with what the water board's requiring the U.S. Army Corps to do for permitting that affects all of their projects. So they're kind of drawing a line in the sand and saying, wait a minute, we've got to sort this out before we commence any further. It delayed the project to be bid and awarded in December and constructed in the spring. I don't know how many months of a delay it was, but we are hopeful before this delay that the work would be done before the winter season this year. So it's significant enough to where we have to face another winter storm season without the repairs being done. But last month they performed another inspection of our break wall and nothing has changed since their last inspection, which indicated that it could accommodate another winter storm season. So they're still confident that even though we've got to do this additional storm, we'll be all right. We went through the Portofino slips already. The moorings, the question came up on our moorings. Our international boardwalk kind of property management group that deals with our Basin 3 slips also does routine maintenance of our moorings. Most recently, I think 3 months ago, might have been 2 months ago, we just spent $35,000 updating the moorings, replacing, repairing. They get snagged a lot, things like that. So that just got done. I don't know how often it happens. I'll have to look that up, but just a month ago or so ago, we put about $35,000 into it.
This is the second time I remember it being mentioned since they were installed, so probably like every other year, but I could be
Maybe
wrong.
so, yeah. I'll get with my property manager and just
Thanks.
see if there's a schedule or something, you know? And then the last comment that I got was regarding the upcoming storm season and what preparations we were doing. I did invite Kurt Mahoney, who I think is in the back. So I'm inviting our new harbor master, Kurt Mahoney, up here today. He's going to address just what the fire department and the harbor patrol are doing to prepare for this upcoming winter storm season.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
With regards to this particular issue, quite frankly, I reached out to Chief May. He's, prior to my appointment, is charge in operations, and by and large, all three division chiefs are still in charge of operations for the harbor area. So I also talked with Chief Butler as well. They produced a document with regards to 3 different levels based on weather patterns, based on certain, specifically wind, sea surge, and tide increase. And based on those criteria, if they're met in a consistent manner, this information comes to the National Weather Service, and there's a 14-day monitoring process. If there's a significant event that's predicted to come, once it reaches the 7 days, then it's given one of 3 numerical designations, basically 1, 2, and 3. 3 being the most severe, 1 being the least severe. And any combination of those, more action is brought to bear in order to help prepare in advance of that weather system, if you will. I know with the first one, or number 1, it's somewhat minor. Public Works is contacted. There's potentially increase of water damage from surge and stuff. So the actual solution or fix, if you will, in those situations, based on what I was told and what I read, was the utilization of sandbags, not unlike on the land-based. As we get into the Category 2 and Category 3, now we're looking at a virtual emergency operations center activation 96 hours prior to the event, department heads being notified, and then monitoring through that. And then when we get to the 3rd level, if you will, an actual activation of the EOC 12 hours prior, having physical bodies at the emergency operations center, and then contact with our partners here in the southern region, contact the OES, Office of Emergency Services up in SAC, and just letting them know, hey, this is what we're anticipating coming. This is the anticipated sort of damage, the potential effects of the city, and then possibly utilizing those resources on a more, from the county to the region, and then ultimately to the state, depending on how severe we predict the issue would be. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but there's a mitigation plan in place, as well as a recovery portion of that document as well. So, okay, then the question becomes, what do we do post? If it's severe enough, right, take a look at what just happened in Florida. The feds are involved, and FEMA is, of course, involved, and those resources are utilized as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. With the chair's indulgence, I had asked Greg this question ahead of time. I was thinking about that hurricane, and I was also thinking we're not meeting in November. And kind of my question was, hey, we've got the same breakwall we did last year. Seems to have gotten through last winter just fine. So hopefully this winter's no worse than last winter. But, we're not meeting until December, and if we think of this in December, we may already be having storms. So, if there's any help you need from us, if there's anything we should be telling the city council, please tell us now. Please tell us in December, because then, we're really in the thick of things by then.
Sure.
I think, so, my question was kind of like, hey, is what was written last year, that emergency plan that Butler and May wrote last year, is that still in effect? Any changes to it? I think we got as high as like level 2 one night last year. I remember seeing you guys staging a lot of fire equipment in the harbor.
So I guess two parts to your question. The first part I'll answer is, yes, the document still exists as in its form as it did last year, the prior year. Secondarily, I did not include that. In addition to the Emergency Operations Center, there's a more robust response from the fire department land side, as well as potentially adding a couple more individuals down in the harbor, right? So we've got one boat that's being repaired currently, but we typically have 2 boats. We have other individuals on the department that have knowledge how to operate the boat as well. So part of that plan, level 2, level 3, calls for potentially bringing in another harbor patrol, if you will. So there's an additional sea resource, as well as coordinating with Los Angeles County and specifically the lifeguards that are down there in order to help mitigate any sort of problems. To address, and if I hear you correctly, it sounds like one of your concerns is the current physical infrastructure of the harbor, like the break wall, the docks, things of that nature. I can't specifically speak to those things right now, only the operational piece, but I can definitely get with Greg and get with my bosses and have a conversation around that and say, hey, wait, where are we, if anywhere, on these? And, do we think that there's things that need to happen down there in order to buffer those? I mean, there's always money constraints, personnel, all the things that come with those things. But yeah, we could certainly, I could have a conversation with Greg and just roundtable that and see where we are on that. Are there deficiencies? And if so, what can we do potentially to address those deficiencies from a structural standpoint withstanding storms, if I'm hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I mean, my concern a year ago was we were going through, one last winter with an unrepaired break wall, and the harbor's, a year older than it used to be, and some parts of it are 50 years old. And now it's all a year older, and the break wall didn't get repaired. So, and then part of the deal last year was also, to tell leaseholders and stakeholders and, the Boat Alert Network when that's going, tell people to go down and check their dock lines. I think there was a couple areas where we had docks break away. We had significant damage to the King Harbor Yacht Club docks. And a lot of smaller stuff, just boats, breaking loose and bouncing around.
Yeah, I know in my prior positions at the department and being in a position, well, I've been a primary instructor and I currently run the CERT program. I don't know if anything exists like that down in the harbor, whether it's a formalized teaching, right? Like the 9-week process or the 9 weeks that we do that on the land side, but maybe we could have some sort of CERT type program and the boaters could come, and it could be anywhere from, I don't know, a weekend to several weeks, depending on the subject matter and the number of people that are interested in it, but to provide an educational piece, to your point, around boating safety, docks, all of it with regards to in preparation of natural disasters, not unlike we do with earthquakes, which is usually the emphasis of the conversation during that 9-week course. We certainly talk about man-made incidents, terrorism, things like that. Tornadoes, hurricanes, we can certainly have that conversation, but really this is earthquake country. But again, getting to your point, in this community, in this area, it's water specific. So the question becomes, okay, that's one thing to prepare for an earthquake. Well, how do we prepare from a significant weather event, storm event, and what does that look like for us? So, yeah, I mean, I could certainly put something together like that, develop that, and bring it to the community and communicate it through the harbor managers. And hey, let's do a weekend, or again, however long it takes, however many weeks. And if you want to come, show up. I can provide that education. I can coordinate with the LA County lifeguards as well. Maybe they could have a part to play in that as well. So,
yeah, the two things I know of, I know that Chief May had talked about starting to map out where the liveaboards were and how to get notifications out. It's not always liveaboards. It can be, other people down there for a weekend and stuff. It's a tough problem.
Yeah.
One of the things that used to be down there was just a dock captain program, where on every dock,
Can you repeat that again?
a dock captain,
Oh, okay.
where, on every dock, typically a liveaboard, there was somebody who was, kind of the mayor of that dock. and knew
Sounds
a
similar
little
to
more
like a
what's going
neighborhood
on.
watch program.
Exactly,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
I think that went away. Vicky would know more if she were here. I'm not sure if Lee knows more. I think that may have gone away with the Guthries.
I think it actually died before that, but yeah, it's pretty much gone.
Yeah. I mean, right, you have to make people aware that this is something that we want to sort of institute, if you will, or make people more aware, but then you have to have people that are willing to step up and make that happen. So,
Yeah.
So there's a couple pieces of that, but I think in lieu of that, having more permanence, we could definitely talk and think about instituting some sort of educational program on a quarterly, biannual basis, or hey, we're getting ready for storm season. Not unlike on the land side with the fire service, come May, we really start putting more emphasis on our wildland skills and hey, in preparation for the fire season. So maybe, based on typically the weather's worse in the wintertime, maybe every October, right? And I'm just making up some name or times of the year off the top of my head, but I would think, hey, maybe every October we have this training, if you will, and it's open to the public, the boating community specifically. This is the subjects that we're going to cover. We can have that. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
That's correct.
All right.
Thank you.
Any questions on my report at all, or? So we go to referrals to staff, if you have that. Anything unrelated to the report, but just want to direct staff to do something or research something or answer something? Okay.
I have just two comments. One, King Tide's coming up November 15, 16, 17, and December 13, 14, 15, middle of the next 2 months. Those are always fun to see, so they'll happen before our next meeting. And the second thing, I sent out an email, but just kind of an attaboy to everybody who was involved in the dredging program. One of the biologists who made comments on it, Mike Kofer, has been finding an unusual number, a record number of giant sea bass around the coast this year, including in Redondo. So it's really good that we did a good thing with dredging and did the dredging in the first half of the year when we weren't affecting the juveniles, because it would really suck if, Mike was out there surveying these things and he was finding record numbers everywhere except Redondo. So, it's great we did a good job. I'm frankly really proud of that. The last time we did dredging back in 2011 with the sand from Marina Del Rey that was dumped onto the beach, there was a lot of trash, there was a lot of complaints, and I'm really, really happy that we got through dredging this year and did it the right way and did it clean. So thanks to everyone involved with that.
Awesome.
I just want to welcome Commissioner Kohler to our esteemed row of chairs. So just welcome, glad to have you aboard.
Pleasure to be here.
Any other comments? Motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
See you all in December.
See you December 9th.
December 9th.